My name is Sienna Caldwell, and I'm 29.
If you've never dated someone who lives like a loose thread, let me translate what it does to you. You start tying knots in places you don't even notice. You triple check the locks. You keep receipts. You learn the difference between romantic spontaneity and someone who will absolutely forget rent exists. I'm an actuary. My job is risk, quantifying it, predicting it, warning people what they don't want to hear. I build models that say, if you keep doing this, here is what happens next. I've spent my entire adult life believing that information makes you safer. I applied none of that logic to Caleb. Caleb was 27, beautiful in the way people are when they've never had to be practical. He was an aspiring ceramicist, hands always dusted with clay, eyes always somewhere far away, like the present moment bored him. He worked part-time at a coffee shop downtown, the kind with exposed brick and $9 lattes, and he spoke about energy the way I spoke about interest rates. He moved into my apartment slowly, a toothbrush first, then a hoodie, then a shelf of mugs he insisted were all unique personalities, which, looking back, was the first sign he needed other people to fund his imagination. I loved him anyway. God, I loved him. I loved the chaos because I thought my stability balanced it out. I was wrong. My stability didn't balance him. It financed him. The breakup happened on a Tuesday, the cruel kind of ordinary day that doesn't even bother to wear a warning label. I remember because I'd scheduled a grocery delivery and a quarterly review on the same afternoon, and I'd felt proud of myself for making it all work. Caleb sat me down on our beige love seat, the one I bought, delivered, assembled, and paid for with a credit card that never carried a balance. Barnaby, our golden retriever mix, hopped up between us like he could physically keep us in the same life if he pressed his warm body hard enough. Caleb took a breath like he was about to announce a tragedy. I need space, he said. Space, the word people use when they want to leave but don't want to be the villain. To do what? I asked too calmly. I heard my own voice and hated it, like I was interviewing him for a claim. He looked past me as if the room itself could give him the right phrasing. To find my voice again. I feel stifled. Stifled. I blinked once. By what? And he did what he always did when cornered by specifics. He grabbed a feeling and threw it like a smoke bomb. By the way you ask about budgets, by cleaning schedules, by the constant questions. His jaw tightened, righteous. It's like you don't trust me to be me. I stared at him. I wanted to say, I don't trust you to pay your phone bill on time, but I didn't. I wanted to say, I have never met a man who needs space and also needs my card for art supplies, but I didn't. Instead, I said, I thought being partners meant talking about life logistics. He stood up fast, like partnership was a trap. That's the thing, Sienna. You make everything a ledger. A ledger. Like paying rent is an insult to the muse. He told me he was going to stay with his sister for a while. He said it with that careful vagueness that meant he wanted me to supply the hope. He kissed Barnaby on the head, avoided my eyes, and carried out 2 duffel bags like that, covered everything he'd absorbed from my life for the past 3 years. Then the door clicked shut, and the apartment, my apartment, felt like the air had been sucked out. Barnaby wandered to the hallway, nails ticking softly, waiting for the sound of Caleb's keys again. When it didn't come, he sat down and looked back at me like, so, what now? I did the only thing my body knew how to do. I went still. And then, like a malfunctioning machine, I started moving again, washing a mug that wasn't dirty, wiping a counter that was already clean, checking my phone like if I stared hard enough, I could rewrite reality. That night, I didn't sleep. I listened to the building settle. I listened to Barnaby sigh in his bed. I listened to my own heartbeat and kept thinking, this is a misunderstanding. We just need a conversation. I can fix this. Day 1, I convinced myself he was overwhelmed. Day 3, I convinced myself love meant patience. Day 7, I convinced myself grand gestures were proof of devotion. That was the beginning of the spiral. For 27 days, I did what I now call the pick-me pilgrimage, traveling from dignity to humiliation one step at a time, pretending it was romantic. On day 7, I sent flowers. Not grocery store flowers. Imported peonies, his favorite, because he once told me the scent made him feel safe. The bouquet was $150, and it arrived with a handwritten note that made my stomach burn as I wrote it. I miss you. I'm sorry. Come home. Sorry for what? Asking him to rinse a dish? Days 8 through 14, I wrote letters. Heavy cardstock. Ink that didn't smudge. I poured my self-respect onto paper like it was a sacrifice. I apologized for working late. I apologized for asking him to contribute. I apologized for wanting our life to function. Days 15 through 21, the grand gestures. I bought tickets to a music festival he'd been talking about for months. I offered to pay for a private kiln setup in the garage because he'd once complained the communal studio killed his vibe. I found myself saying things like, I can make it easier for you, like my role in the relationship was to remove friction from his existence. And then, days 22 through 27, silence. I told myself silence meant he was thinking. I told myself silence meant he was processing. I told myself silence meant he'd come back if I just didn't spook him with need. On day 28, he agreed to meet. A hipster coffee shop downtown. Exposed brick. Plants hanging from the ceiling like decor vines. A barista who looked like he'd never met a haircut he liked. I got there early and chose a table where I could see the door because control is the drug I reach for when my heart is panicking. I ordered black coffee, no sugar, no milk, just bitterness, honest and uncomplicated. At 11:15 a.m., the bell over the door rang. Caleb walked in. And he wasn't alone. A woman followed one step behind him. Blonde hair twisted into an effortless knot. Oversized sweater falling off one shoulder like she'd rehearsed the angle. She had that curated kind of messy that takes time and money. And she moved like she belonged in whatever room she entered. Caleb didn't introduce her right away, which told me everything before he said a word. The woman sat down beside him like the seat had been saved for her. Caleb looked lighter, like the gravity of my reality had been removed from his body. Sienna, he said, using my name gently, like he was petting a nervous animal. Thanks for meeting. I stared at him, then at her. Who is she? The woman smiled, not friendly, not cruel, just entertained. Caleb cleared his throat. This is Maya. Maya, his ex-girlfriend, the one he'd referred to as ancient history, the one he'd said was totally in the past. The one whose name I'd heard only in vague stories that always ended with him being the wounded artist and her being the only person who ever understood him. My fingers tightened around my coffee cup. Maya leaned forward slightly, eyes flicking over me like a quick appraisal. Hi, she said. I've heard a lot. Caleb's hand moved, casual, practiced, and rested on top of hers. And I felt something inside me go very quiet. Caleb sighed. I got your letters. They were intense, Maya added, like she was reviewing a movie. I forced myself to breathe. I meant every word, I said, keeping my eyes on Caleb. I want to fix this. His mouth twitched. For a second, I thought it might be regret. Then he glanced at Maya, and the regret disappeared into whatever approval he was seeking. That's just it, he said. You think you can buy closeness. You think you can purchase emotional repair. I heard my own pulse in my ears. I didn't... Maya cut in softly, smiling. Caleb needs room to breathe. You can't spreadsheet someone into loving you the right way. There it was. The insult dressed up as insight. Caleb nodded like she'd said something profound. Maya and I, we have a connection that transcends material stuff. My throat went dry. So you're back together. Caleb's eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe, or the performance of it. We've been seeing each other for a few weeks. A few weeks, meaning before the Tuesday, before the space, before the letters, before the flowers, before I blamed myself for being the kind of woman who wanted a life that didn't collapse under its own whim. I didn't plan it, he said quickly, defensive on instinct. It just happened. We were closing at the shop one night and the energy was there. Maya smirked. Art is pain, Sienna. Caleb needs someone who understands that. I looked at them. I looked at Caleb wearing the jacket I bought him last winter. I looked at Maya sipping the latte he didn't pay for. I looked at the little clay charm on Caleb's keychain, made from supplies I'd funded. I looked at the way they leaned toward each other, like they were the only two people in the world. And the strangest thing happened. The grief didn't hit first. The anger didn't hit first. The calculator in my brain turned back on. Rent? $400. I paid 100%. Utilities? $250. I paid $100. Groceries? $600. I paid $100 because processed food kills creativity. Phone bill? $90. On my family plan. Car insurance? Bundled under my policy. Streaming services? Subscriptions? The storage shelf for his unsold ceramics. Emergency charges that weren't emergencies. I did the math so fast it felt like relief. I set my coffee down carefully. So, I said, voice steady, you're choosing Maya. Caleb's chin lifted. I'm choosing myself, he corrected, like he'd rehearsed it. Maya squeezed his hand, satisfied. I nodded once. Then I smiled. A real smile. Small, clean, terrifying in its calm. Thank you, I said. Caleb blinked. What? Thank you, I repeated. You have no idea how much I needed to hear this. Maya's smile faltered, just a millimeter. Caleb frowned, confused. You're not mad? Mad? I stood up, slow enough that my chair didn't scrape. Caleb, I'm relieved. His eyes narrowed. Relieved? Yes, I said softly. You just freed me. I reached into my wallet and placed a bill on the table for the coffees, because I was still me, still the woman who paid the tab even while her world burned. Then I turned and walked out without looking back. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking, not from heartbreak, from adrenaline, from clarity, from the sudden, brutal understanding that I'd been trying to win back a man who was already spending my money on his next life. I sat in the driver's seat and pulled out my phone. It was 11:15 a.m., and by 11:30 a.m. I was done being his safety net. I didn't cry when I left that coffee shop. That part shocked me more than anything. Because if you'd asked me a week earlier, I would have told you I'd die if Caleb didn't come back. I would have told you my chest would cave in, my life would split clean in half, my heart would drag itself across broken glass just to reach him. But walking to my car, all I felt was air. Cold, sharp, honest air. Like someone had finally opened a window in a room I'd been suffocating in for years. Still, my hands shook so badly I had to grip the steering wheel with both palms before I trusted myself to drive, not from sadness, from adrenaline, from the eerie clarity that comes when your brain stops trying to protect your heart from reality. I sat there for a full minute, watching people through the windshield, laughing, carrying laptops, ordering pastries, like the world hadn't just rearranged my life in the most humiliating way possible. Then I looked down at my phone. 11:15 a.m. I tapped my banking app first because instinctively, I always start where the truth lives. And there it was, like a final insult. A pending charge on the emergency credit card Caleb had as an authorized user. 68.43 at Vinny's Vinyls. Of course. Not groceries, not gas, not an actual emergency. Records. Probably for some sound bath playlist Maya approved of. My thumb hovered for half a second. The old version of me, day 7, flowers me, would have rationalized it. He's stressed. He needs comfort. He'll pay it back when he can. But the woman I became inside that coffee shop didn't negotiate with delusion anymore. I disputed the charge as unauthorized use. Then I canceled the card entirely. My heartbeat didn't slow. It sped up, because now I was moving, and movement is how you outrun grief. By 11:30 a.m., I called Verizon. Hi, I said, voice steady in that strange way it gets when your emotions decide to hide behind professionalism. I need to remove a line from my family plan, effective immediately. The representative asked me for the number. I gave it. She asked if I was sure. I smiled at the dashboard like she could see it. I'm sure. By 11:45 a.m., I called my insurance provider. Please remove Caleb as a driver, I said. And remove the vehicle. Yes, immediately. There was a pause, the tiny friction of bureaucracy. May I ask the reason? We're no longer together, I said. That was the first time I said it out loud, without flinching. We're no longer together. Not we're going through something. Not he needs space. We're done. At noon, I went into my apartment. The door shut behind me, and the quiet hit like a physical thing. Barnaby trotted up, tail wagging, carrying one of Caleb's old socks like it was a trophy. He dropped it at my feet, looked up, and waited, hopeful, innocent, stupidly loyal. My throat tightened for the first time. Because Barnaby didn't know space. Barnaby didn't know betrayal dressed as self-discovery. Barnaby only knew the pack had changed, and no one explained why. Hey, buddy, I whispered, crouching to scratch behind his ears. It's just us now. He sneezed in my face. I laughed. One sharp sound, and then I stood up fast, because if I let myself stay there too long, I might collapse. I walked through the apartment and saw the empty spaces where Caleb's things had been. Or rather, the spaces where his things had always been temporary. A few mugs, a throw blanket, a shelf of half-finished clay pieces that never became anything. And that was when it hit me with sick clarity. Caleb hadn't built a life with me. He'd parked himself in mine. That night, I fed Barnaby a steak, because I needed to do something that felt like a decision instead of a reaction. Then I fell into bed and slept for 12 hours straight, like my body had been holding itself upright on sheer panic for weeks, and finally got permission to shut down. The next morning, the text started. It was 8:03 a.m. when the first one came through. Caleb, my phone isn't working. Calls keep dropping. Did you forget to pay the bill?
I stared at the message, and for a second my stomach tried to summon the old guilt. Then I remembered him at the coffee shop, hand on Maya's like it was sacred. I didn't reply. At 8:17 a.m., Caleb, Sienna, seriously, I need my data. I'm trying to upload content. Upload content. Of course. His life was a movie he was always filming, and I'd just been the sponsor. At 9:00 a.m., Caleb, why is my card declined? I'm at the gas station. This is embarrassing. That one made me pause, not because I cared, but because the entitlement was so immediate it almost felt like satire. Like he truly believed the breakup came with a refund policy.
I waited until my lunch break because even now I refuse to let him steal my entire day.
At 12:14 p.m., I typed one sentence. Me. We broke up. You chose Maya. I stopped paying for your life. The reply was instant, like he'd been hovering on Wi-Fi, refreshing, waiting for me to come back into position.
Caleb, you can't just cut me off like that. That's financial abuse. We had an agreement.
I laughed out loud in the office break room. A woman across from me glanced up, startled. I smiled politely like nothing was happening, but inside something in me sharpened. I typed, me. The agreement was that we were partners. You ended the partnership. I accepted the resignation. Then I blocked his number on my personal phone. Not out of spite, out of necessity. Because I knew myself. I knew if I kept seeing his name pop up, my brain would keep trying to solve him like a problem. And I wasn't solving him anymore. But I didn't block email. Because there was still one thing tying us together like a fraying rope. The lease. Our apartment lease had 6 months left. Both our names were on it. But the truth, the real truth Caleb never liked, was that my income was the only reason we qualified. I was the anchor. He was the ornament. That afternoon, I emailed our landlord, Mr. Henderson. He was an older guy with a permanent frown and the kind of voice that sounded like it had yelled at teenagers for decades. He didn't like drama. He liked on-time payments. So I wrote like a person who paid on time. Mr. Henderson, Caleb Winslow has moved out of the unit. I will be serving the remainder of the lease alone. Please restrict access to leaseholders only. Since Caleb has vacated and surrendered keys, I'm requesting a lock change for security. Mr. Henderson replied 2 hours later. Approved. Locksmith fee is your responsibility. Done. $200 well spent. 2 days later, Caleb emailed me. Subject line, you locked me out. The audacity came in uppercase. I came by to get my winter coats and the locks don't work. Maya was with me, and she said this is illegal eviction. If you don't give me a key, we're calling the police. I read it twice. Not because I didn't understand it, because I couldn't believe the confidence. Maya, his ex-girlfriend, now his transcendent connection, was already speaking for him like she lived in my walls. I forwarded the email to Mr. Henderson, then replied to Caleb with a single paragraph. Me. You moved out. You surrendered possession. If you want your coats, tell me a time and I'll leave them in the lobby with the concierge. You are not entering the unit. 10 minutes later, you're being petty. Then, because entitlement always comes with backup singers, the next emails started coming from people I recognized. Friends of Caleb's, mutual acquaintances, people who had eaten my food at my table and let Caleb talk about his creative process while I washed dishes. One wrote, he's an artist, Sienna. He can't handle this kind of stress. Another, why are you jealous? Maya's actually really nice. Jealous. That word. The way people love to call boundaries jealousy, so they don't have to admit someone is being exploited. I didn't respond. I just kept doing the math. In 2 weeks, I'd saved over $1,000 simply by not financing Caleb's journey. I took Barnaby to the expensive groomer, and he came back looking like a majestic lion, fluffy, proud, unbothered. I bought groceries without someone tossing organic quinoa into the cart like it was a moral requirement. And then, on a Thursday night, a Credit Karma notification popped up on my phone like a quiet revenge. New credit inquiry detected. Caleb had tried to open a credit card. He'd been rejected. Because his credit score, propped up for years by being linked to my pristine accounts, had started to collapse the second I removed him. The next email from him came less than 12 hours later. Subject. Let's be adults. I opened it expecting apology. I got a business proposal. Sienna, look, I know you're hurt, but punishing me isn't the answer. Maya and I are struggling. Her gig money is inconsistent, and I'm waiting on opportunities. I need you to co-sign a lease for us, just for a year, until we get on our feet. You know I'm good for it, for the sake of what we had. I stared at the screen so long my eyes started to burn. He wanted me to co-sign a lease. For him. And Maya. The woman he brought to the coffee shop like a trophy. My fingers went cold. Not from heartbreak. From rage so clean it felt like frost. I typed 2 words. Me, no. Then, because I wanted it to land like a door slamming, I added one more. Me, unsubscribe. I didn't know if he understood what it meant, but I did. It meant, you don't get access to me anymore. Not emotionally, not financially, not legally, if I can help it. I hit send, and then I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, feeling the first true wave of dread since the coffee shop. Because I knew something Caleb didn't.
People like him don't accept no the first time.
They don't walk away when the money stops. They come back louder. They come back dirtier. And the lease was still the biggest loose end. He was still tied to my address.
Still tied to my life.
And something in my gut whispered the same thing I'd been ignoring for months.
This isn't over. 6 weeks passed. Not quietly, but deceptively.
The kind of silence that isn't peace, just someone reloading. I almost let myself believe Caleb and Maya had figured something out. A basement sublet, a friend's couch, a creative commune held together by incense and unpaid utilities. I was wrong. I came home on a Thursday evening to find a bright orange notice taped dead center on my door. Lease violation warning. Unauthorized occupants. My stomach dropped, not in fear, but in recognition. Because this wasn't random. This was strategy. I peeled the paper off slowly, like it might explode, then read it twice. According to building management, a non-leaseholder male, musical equipment observed, had been entering and exiting the unit regularly. Noise complaints. Common area misuse.
My hands went cold.
Caleb didn't have a key. I'd changed the locks, which meant only one thing. I walked straight to the leasing office. Mr. Henderson looked up over his glasses when I came in, already tired of me, and already on my side.
Your boyfriend gave a key to a woman, he said flatly. She's been accessing the unit with another individual. Security says he tried to set up a recording booth in the common lounge.
A recording booth. I closed my eyes for half a second.
Maya. She must have gotten in through the dog walker. The spare key Caleb had insisted we give, just in case. The one I'd forgotten about because I trusted him.
I explained everything to Mr. Henderson, how Caleb had moved out, how I'd changed the locks, how I hadn't authorized anyone else. He listened, fingers steepled. Well, he said slowly, Caleb is still on the lease. Technically, he has the right to access, but she doesn't. And if she's living there with him, you're both in violation. My pulse thudded. What does that mean?
He didn't enjoy this part, but he was honest. If it continues, I'll have to start eviction proceedings against both of you. There it was. Their plan. Move Maya in. Create violations. Force me into a corner where I'd either tolerate it or leave and keep paying. Let them keep the apartment. Let me fund their new life quietly, like always. Entitlement doesn't get creative. It just gets bold. I looked at Mr. Henderson, and for the first time since this all started, I smiled. Hypothetically, I said, if I voluntarily terminate my tenancy and pay the lease break fee, what happens to the remaining tenant? Mr. Henderson's eyebrows lifted. He liked me. He hated drama. And he really hated freeloaders with guitars. If the primary income earner vacates, he said carefully, the remaining tenant must re-qualify for the unit alone within 7 days. Income requirement is 3 times the rent. 3 times. The rent was $24. Caleb made maybe $200 a month on a good month. I nodded once. Let's do it, I said. I'll pay the penalty. The break fee was $4,800. A lot of money, but still cheaper than 6 months of supporting Caleb and Maya's vision.
I packed my life in 3 days.
Not emotionally, logistically. Boxes, labels, movers booked without discussion or drama. Barnaby supervised like a general. Saturday morning, the movers arrived at 9. At 11, Caleb and Maya strolled in like it was brunch. Bagels in hand. They froze when they saw the boxes. What are you doing? Caleb asked, his voice cracking just enough to be real.
Moving, I said.
Maya's mouth fell open. You can't do that.
I already did, I replied calmly. I terminated my portion of the lease.
Caleb's face drained of color. We live here.
You can live here, I corrected, if you can prove to Mr. Henderson by Monday that you make $86,000 a year.
Silence. Maya dropped her bagel. That's not fair, Caleb whispered. I stepped closer, just enough for him to hear me clearly. Neither was financing your life, I said. Good luck. I walked out while they stood in the half-empty living room, surrounded by the consequences they'd mistaken for leverage. On Monday, Mr. Henderson called. They didn't qualify, he said. I have issued a 3-day notice to vacate. They're refusing to leave. Not my problem, I said gently. I'm off the lease. You're clear, he confirmed. The eviction will be on Caleb's record. I hung up and felt nothing. Almost. That night, an email arrived. Subject, you ruined everything. I didn't reply.
I sent one thing instead. A Venmo request.
$180. Final car insurance payment, April.
She declined it. Of course she did.
Because accountability always feels like theft to people who are used to being carried. I moved on a Tuesday.
Not because it was symbolic, just because the movers were cheaper midweek. Still, it felt right. The new place was smaller. 1 bedroom. Clean lines. Quiet hallways. No echo of arguments that never technically happened. No half-finished dreams taking up shelf space. Just white walls, a narrow kitchen, and a sliding glass door that opened onto a modest balcony overlooking a row of trees and the low hum of a road that never quite slept.
Freedom doesn't announce itself.
It just stops hurting.
The first night there, I sat on the floor with Barnaby because the couch hadn't arrived yet. We ate takeout from cardboard containers, my back against the wall, his head on my thigh. I watched headlights move below and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest.
Relief. Not joy, not victory.
Relief is quieter than both.
The days that followed were small and uncinematic, but they were mine. I grocery shopped without negotiating anyone else's philosophy. I cooked meals that made sense. I went to bed when I was tired instead of waiting for someone else's creative energy to land. Barnaby adapted instantly. He learned the new walking route in 2 days. He claimed the sunniest patch of carpet like he'd always lived there. He stopped waiting by the door at night. That last part mattered more than I wanted to admit. Financially, the change was immediate. Without Caleb's lifestyle attached to my account, my bank balance stopped doing that subtle dip that makes your stomach tighten every time you open an app. Even with the lease break fee amortized across the coming months, I was on track to be debt-free faster than I'd planned.
I breathed easier. I slept deeper.
I started noticing things again, like how silence can feel full instead of empty.
I took up a hobby I'd always delayed because it didn't fit into Caleb's aesthetic of suffering for art.
I restored things.
Furniture first. Old pieces from estate sales. Solid wood, hidden under scratches and bad stain. I liked the methodical process. Strip, sand, repair, finish. There was something deeply satisfying about taking something damaged and making it functional again without pretending it had never been hurt.
I wasn't fixing myself. I was just practicing. I dated a little. Nothing serious. Coffee dates. Dinners that ended politely. I learned something new about myself quickly. The moment I smelled entitlement, my body shut down. I need a partner who can support my dreams now translated instantly in my head to I need someone to subsidize my chaos. No thanks.
I became ruthlessly observant.
I didn't argue anymore. I just noticed. Caleb's emails slowed, then stopped. Maya disappeared from the narrative entirely, which told me exactly how that situation was going. People like her don't stay when the floor drops out. They float to the next structure that can hold them. Every once in a while, an unknown number would call my phone. I never answered. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't need to reopen doors just to confirm they were closed. A year passed like that. Not dramatically. Productively. I upgraded my furniture. I increased my savings contributions. I took Barnaby on weekend hikes and learned the exact way he liked his ears scratched when he was tired. My life became boring, in the best possible way. And then, on a quiet afternoon, exactly 1 year after the coffee shop, the past found my number again. Unknown caller. Normally, I let those go to voicemail. But I was waiting on a call from a parts supplier for a restoration project, and my hands were already dirty, and something in me said, "Answer it. End it."
Hello?
There was a pause. Then, "Sienna?" The voice was thinner, scraped raw, like it had been sleeping on hard surfaces. I closed my eyes. "Caleb." "Yes," I said. "Why are you calling?" He didn't answer right away. I heard movement. Wind. Something metallic rattling. "He left me," he said suddenly. I blinked. "Who?" "Maya," he said, like the name tasted bitter now. "She left. She cheated on me. With a guy from a band. I don't even know his last name." I waited, because I knew the pivot was coming. "She took everything," he rushed on. "Sold my equipment. Stuck me with the motel bill. I have nothing, Sienna. I'm at the bus station." There it was. The softening. The nostalgia loading screen.
"I was thinking about you," he whispered. "About us. About how safe I felt with you."
Safe. He never called it that when he had it. I looked down at Barnaby, asleep on his bed, paws twitching in a dream. He hadn't looked for Caleb once in a year. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "I don't have a place," he said quickly. "I thought maybe I could crash on your couch, just for a few days, until I get back on my feet." The entitlement was still there, buried under tears, but solid as bone. No, I said. What? His voice sharpened. Sienna, come on, we were together for 3 years. And for 1 year, I replied evenly, I've been rebuilding the life you tried to dismantle. I'm not your safety net anymore. You're so cold, he snapped, anger cutting through the sadness. You always were. That's why I left. And yet, I said calmly, you're calling the cold person for help. Silence. Then, smaller, meaner. I haven't eaten since yesterday. I exhaled slowly. I'll send you $50, I said, for food and a bus ticket to your parents' house. Do not call me again. 50? He scoffed. That's insulting. You make... I hung up. Then I sent the money. Caption, final transaction. And I blocked the number. I stood there for a moment after, phone in my hand, workshop quiet around me, waiting for something to hit. Guilt, anger, vindication. What came instead was peace. I picked up the sandpaper and went back to work. The piece I was restoring had a dent in it, not fatal, just evidence of impact. With enough time and care, it would be smooth again. Barnaby snored. You're right, buddy, I said softly. Let's get back to work. I didn't save him. I didn't destroy him. I just let him be the main character in his own tragedy, and walked off stage.